Most people believe that when life feels hard, the solution must lie in trying harder. Eat healthier, work longer, budget smarter, repeat affirmations, say yes to that extra project, say no to that indulgence, keep your head down, keep pushing. But what if, even after all that effort, the money still disappears quietly before you can catch your breath? What if your energy keeps dipping, your luck never quite holds, and deep down you're starting to wonder if something outside of you is shaping this pattern? Not your work ethic, not your intelligence, not even your mindset. What if the space you're living in, the environment you return to every single day, is quietly working against you? That's not just a poetic idea. It's one of the core teachings of classical Feng Shui. And nowhere is that more apparent than in your kitchen. In this tradition, the kitchen is not just where food is prepared. It is the energetic heart of wealth, nourishment, rhythm, and family vitality. It holds more than your groceries. It holds the emotional temperature of your life. And whether you realize it or not, every item in that space, its placement, its function, its cleanliness, its symbolism, is sending a message to your body, your finances, and the energy field that surrounds you. You may have a perfectly designed modern kitchen or a humble corner in a small apartment. That doesn't matter. What matters is the intention behind what's placed there. Because when something as simple as your trash can sits beside your stove, or your dining table becomes cluttered with pills and receipts, your space begins to tell a story of mixed signals. A story where waste and nourishment sit side by side, where chaos and routine blend, where broken plates suggest incomplete luck. These aren't just aesthetic concerns, they're energetic conflicts. You might be thinking, how could a chipped bowl or a misplaced knife influence my income? But energy doesn't respond to logic, it responds to coherence. And when your kitchen is out of coherence, no amount of budgeting apps or motivational podcasts will bring lasting clarity. That's the work of the space itself. So today we're going to quietly re-examine the part of your home you've likely overlooked. I'll walk you through 7 common kitchen mistakes that drain energy, money, and motivation, often without a single word. Then I'll show you 3 simple but powerful additions that prosperous households often include, not because they read it in a book, but because their homes evolved into energy fields that welcome abundance and protect it. And no, you don't need to rebuild your home. You don't need to follow a trend. You don't need to burn sage or place a frog statue by your sink. You only need to become aware of how your space is already shaping your experience, and how small, quiet changes, done with full attention, can start to tell a new story. A story where your kitchen works with you, not against you. A story where energy flows instead of circles back. And if this kind of grounded, poetic approach to Feng Shui resonates with you, if you appreciate insights that are practical, calming, and rooted in deeper meaning, I'd love to invite you to support this channel, New Day Mindfulness. I'm on a slow and steady path to 1,000 subscribers, and every like, every share, every new follower helps us build a space where ancient wisdom meets modern life in a way that feels honest and gentle. If this video helps you see your home a little differently, I hope you'll let me know in the comments. And if it inspires you to shift even one small thing in your kitchen today, then that shift alone may be enough to start redirecting your energy toward clarity and abundance. So let's begin. No pressure, no perfection, just presence, and one quiet doorway back into the wealth your home may already be trying to offer you. Part 1, Foundational Insight, your kitchen as a financial center. In Feng Shui, the kitchen is not just a place for cooking meals or brewing tea. It is quite literally the alchemical heart of the home, a space where heat transforms raw ingredients into nourishment, where routine becomes ritual, and where invisible elements like fire and earth quietly govern the household's flow of wealth, vitality, and stability. To understand the kitchen's power is to begin seeing your environment not as neutral backdrop, but as co-creator of your financial and emotional landscape. You might think money is earned through your toil or business, and of course that's true, but just as important is how your environment reflects and reinforces your capacity to receive, store, and sustain what you earn. In that context, the kitchen becomes more than functional. It becomes foundational. Why? Because in classical five-element theory, the kitchen is a hub where the fire element, represented by the stove, and the earth element, represented by the act of nourishment, food storage, and even the dining area, intersect. Fire symbolizes energy, transformation, momentum. Earth symbolizes grounding, storage, and lasting support. Together, they create a container for abundance. Too much fire without earth, and money comes fast but disappears quickly, like a flash sale that leads to no profit. Too much earth without fire, and there's stability but no momentum, like a safe house that never grows. A balanced kitchen, then, is one that holds heat without burning out, that stores without stagnating, and that nurtures without draining. Most people don't realize this. They focus on countertops and cabinetry. They obsess over color schemes or brands. But Feng Shui practitioners see something else: the way energy pools behind the stove, the way qi enters from the hallway and collects or disperses at the sink, the way clutter around a rice jar suggests inconsistent savings, the way a dark corner near the pantry makes you forget what you already have, leading to overbuying and waste. In this philosophy, nothing is accidental. Everything holds shape, and every shape has consequence. One of the most overlooked truths in Feng Shui is that spaces don't just reflect your behavior, they influence it. A cluttered kitchen tends to produce rushed meals. Rushed meals tend to create scattered energy. Scattered energy often mirrors impulsive spending. This is not superstition. This is psychology. What you do daily becomes who you are. And the kitchen is one of the only rooms where daily ritual is guaranteed. Preparing food, opening drawers, boiling water, placing your hands on surfaces that have absorbed years of habits and moods. Over time, that repetition becomes code. That code becomes pattern. And that pattern becomes fate. Which is why ancient masters paid so much attention to the smallest details, where the knives are stored, or what materials touch the food, how visible the stove burners are, whether the cook stands with their back to the door or faces the flow of the house. These aren't aesthetic concerns. They are decisions about alignment. A kitchen that feels aligned, it doesn't have to be expensive, trendy, or big. It has to be intentional. When someone walks into a kitchen with clean, visible stove burners, a well-organized pantry, and a sense of quiet warmth, they don't just see order. They feel clarity. That feeling lingers. It shapes how they cook, how they eat, how they speak to their family while slicing fruit or stirring broth. That energy enters the body. That energy leaves with the children to school. That energy sits in the gut when it's time to negotiate a raise or prepare a proposal. This is how space becomes story, and how the story shapes your wallet. Let's talk practically for a moment. A stove that hasn't been used in weeks tends to represent dormant wealth energy. Not just literal money, but the energy that fuels consistent action and reward. A refrigerator overflowing with forgotten food might suggest unconscious hoarding or a fear of scarcity. A dining table covered in random objects, mail, receipts, water bottles, laptops, can indicate blurred boundaries between nourishment and transaction. These signals may seem small, but their effects are cumulative. Over time, they dull your focus. They create energetic crosstalk, where your intentions compete with your environment's signals. You may light a candle for abundance or write financial goals in a notebook. But if you then step into a kitchen where the stove is blocked, the rice jar is half empty, and the trash is in full view, your body receives a conflicting message. The home says, we are disorganized, we are unstable, we are not ready to hold more. And so your subconscious aligns with that story, often without your permission. This is where the real art of Feng Shui begins, not in fancy layouts or rare talismans, but in rewriting those signals, in restoring energetic coherence. That might mean something as simple as cleaning all 4 burners, even the ones you don't use. It might mean designating a drawer for medicine instead of leaving pills on the table. It might mean placing a small plant near the stove to soften harsh lines and reintroduce the wood element as a mediator between fire and water. It could be as symbolic as wrapping your chip bowls and releasing them, thanking them before you discard them. not because they're cursed, but because broken items carry a quiet weight, the weight of incompletion, of subtle emotional drag. And when that energy lives in the place where you feed yourself, you begin to digest it, not just physically, but psychically. You may not notice it in a day or a week, but over time, the accumulation becomes behavioral. We stop cooking with care. We snack more. We rush through meals. We eat in silence. And the kitchen begins to lose its pulse. In Feng Shui, a kitchen with no pulse means a home with no stomach. And a home with no stomach eventually forgets how to digest abundance, how to turn effort into wealth, time into rest, and food into medicine. So what's the takeaway? Your kitchen is not just a room. It is a field of financial intention. It holds the echo of every meal, every conversation over leftovers, every silent moment you stand and sip your morning drink. It's not about being perfect. It's about becoming aware. What your kitchen holds is often mirrored in what your wallet receives. If there's chaos in the cabinets, there may be confusion in your budgeting. If the fire of the stove is dim or unused, the fire of your ambition may flicker too. If your rice jar is always nearly empty, you might notice that your bank account stays just barely full. And if the space where your family gathers to eat is ignored or misused, you may find that connection, intimacy, and support begin to feel out of reach. But the beauty of Feng Shui is that change is always possible, and it rarely requires more than your full attention. A kitchen doesn't need new appliances to feel new. It needs alignment. The burners need to feel alive. The space needs to breathe. The table needs to invite. The food needs to land. When these things happen, even slowly, you begin to notice something shift, not in theory, but in your body, in your sleep, in your confidence, in how easily you make decisions. That is the quiet power of a kitchen that supports your wealth, not with flash, but with foundation. Part 2, 7 mistakes that quietly disrupt abundance. 1. Trash can placement. Among all the objects in the kitchen, there is perhaps none more overlooked than the trash can. It sits quietly in a corner, often beside the stove or beneath the sink. It exists for function and function alone, or so we think. Most people give no thought to its presence, its placement, or its symbolism. But in Feng Shui, the trash can is far more than a bin for discards. It is a moving vessel of residual energy, and where it sits tells a powerful, invisible story about what we value, what we conceal, and most crucially, what we allow to circulate in our home. Trash, by its very nature, represents what has been used, expired, or no longer holds value. And when placed carelessly in areas that represent wealth, nourishment, or health, it does more than offend the senses. It disrupts the energy field that connects action to outcome, effort to reward, food to vitality. A trash can too close to the stove becomes a quiet contradiction. One object fuels the home, the other signals decay. One cooks the meal, the other collects what is thrown away. When they are adjacent, or worse, touching, the message becomes muddled. And so does the energy. The result? A household that works hard, yet struggles to accumulate. A family that eats well, yet feels tired. A home that looks clean, yet feels heavy in the body. You may not notice it in a week or a month, but over time the signals accumulate. Let's begin with the stove. In Feng Shui, the stove is one of the most important symbols in the home. It represents fire energy, the element of momentum, transformation, and prosperity. It is where raw ingredients become nourishment. It is where time and heat convert potential into reality. The stove is often associated with the household's wealth burner. That is not metaphor, it is energetic logic. The more visible, functional, and respected the stove is, the more it supports the resident's ability to sustain income, make clear financial decisions, and remain energized throughout daily life. Now imagine this symbol of wealth sitting beside a lidless trash bin. A container that holds banana peels, grease-soaked paper towels, used coffee filters, and the symbolic residue of everything deemed not worthy to keep. What happens to the energy of the stove when waste energy is parked directly next to it? From a Feng Shui perspective, the fire begins to lose focus. Instead of projecting forward, it begins to swirl. The qi no longer knows whether it is producing or absorbing. It tries to do both and fails. The consequence may not be dramatic, but it will be persistent. Financial gains that should have lasted begin to evaporate. Meals begin to lose their vibrancy. A sense of effort without reward begins to take hold. It shows up in small ways: a lost invoice, an unexpected repair, a subtle decrease in appetite, or an increase in mild irritability. These symptoms don't announce themselves as energetic decay, but that is what they are. The same principle applies to the dining table. The table is not just furniture. It is the symbolic altar of togetherness, ritual, and shared wealth. It is where families exchange more than food. It is where they exchange tone, laughter, updates, intuition, emotional safety. And when a trash can is placed close to this gathering point, the signal once again becomes confused. The table says, gather, be full, be whole. The bin says, release, discard, reject. When these messages overlap, harmony becomes diluted. Children may lose appetite. Couples may find conversation becoming less fluid. The table may become a place of speed instead of ceremony. Feng Shui does not suggest we eliminate the trash. That would be absurd. Life produces waste, but placement matters, and so does containment. The ideal placement for a kitchen trash can is discreet, sealed, and distant from the fire center, the stove, and the symbolic hearth, the dining table. If you can place it in a pull-out cabinet, all the better. If that's not available, then choose a container with a proper lid, preferably one made of metal or ceramic. Materials that have boundary energy. Plastic is porous and does little to stabilize qi. Keep the bin away from the southeast corner of the kitchen if possible, as this is often the wealth sector in classical compass school feng shui. When that is impossible due to layout, other energetic tools can be employed. A layer of coarse sea salt or roasted salt in the bottom of the bin acts as a natural qi buffer. Salt has long been used in space-clearing practices to absorb and stabilize chaotic or residual energy. Add a drop of lemongrass essential oil or dried lemongrass stalks to increase purification. Lemongrass cuts energetic residue much like it clears the palate. It doesn't mask, it refreshes. Replace this mixture weekly or bi-weekly, depending on use. The act of doing so is itself a ritual. It says, I honor the cycles of this space. I tend to even what is discarded. Energetic hygiene is not about being obsessed with purity. It's about creating coherence. A kitchen that respects its fire and manages its waste with intention becomes a space of right relationship. Fire is allowed to burn. Earth is allowed to receive. Water is allowed to clean. Metal is allowed to contain. And wood, through plants, herbs, or structure, holds everything in growth. These elements, when aligned, produce a kitchen that holds money instead of leaking it, that supports digestion instead of agitating it, that anchors the body instead of draining it. You may ask, can moving a trash can really shift my wealth? I invite you to find out. Try it, move it, seal it, salt it. Do so not with skepticism or over-expectation, but with sincerity. Then observe, not just your wallet, but your sleep, your clarity, your appetite, your patience. You may find that what seemed like luck was never about luck at all. It was about alignment. In the homes I've studied, wealthy or modest, large or small, this single shift often marks the beginning of broader changes. In one household, a woman placed a bamboo lid over her visible trash can and added a layer of salt after years of unexplained stomach issues. Within 3 weeks, her digestion improved, and her family's evening meals grew calmer. In another case, a man relocated his bin to the opposite wall and noticed his budgeting suddenly became easier. He didn't earn more, but he spent with more clarity. That clarity created surplus. That surplus created relief. That relief made space for better decisions. And better decisions made space for luck to arrive, not because of superstition, but because of better energetic posture. So what is your trash can telling your home? Is it saying this house honors its energy, even in what it releases? Or is it saying we blur the line between nourishment and neglect? That answer doesn't live in theory. It lives in the next time you take out the trash. 2. Water-fire conflict. One of the most subtle but energetically disruptive dynamics in a kitchen is the silent conflict between two elements that were never meant to sit side by side: water and fire. In five-element theory, water extinguishes fire. This is not just symbolic, it is foundational. The natural cycle of energy, known as the generating and overcoming cycles in classical Feng Shui, explains that water is meant to nourish wood, wood feeds fire, fire produces earth, and so on. But when water directly confronts fire, without mediation, without rhythm, instability enters the environment, often so quietly that it goes unnoticed until it shows up as persistent stress, financial backflow, or low motivation. In the layout of most modern homes, the kitchen sink and the stove are often placed near one another for efficiency. After all, we boil water and wash produce, we sauté and rinse. In terms of convenience, the logic is sound. But in terms of qi, the vital life force of a space, the result can be conflict that undermines both the energy of the cook and the prosperity of the household. When the sink, representing water, and the stove, representing fire, are directly beside each other, or worse, directly across in a galley-style kitchen, the clash is more than aesthetic, it's energetic. It represents a core disagreement within the space. Water tries to cool, soothe, and recede. Fire tries to expand, transform, and energize. When placed too close without a buffer, the two elements interrupt one another's flow. The result is not balance, but agitation. It may show up in your home as interrupted meals, a lack of appetite, or persistent tension in family conversations. It may show up in your life as poor follow-through, fluctuating finances, or decision fatigue. And the most challenging part? Most people don't trace it back to the layout of their kitchen. They blame themselves, their schedule, their boss, their luck. But all the while, two elements in their home are at war, and neither one can do its job properly. Let's imagine what that might look like in physical space. A woman wakes up in the morning. She prepares her coffee over the stove, and just inches away is the sink filled with last night's dishes. As she pours water into the kettle, she feels tight, not because the task is hard, but because the space holds tension. She's been waking up fatigued, finding it harder to feel motivated at work. She's reorganized her calendar, started journaling, even tried new supplements. But she never looked at what's right in front of her, the water that won't yield, the fire that won't burn strong. She might clean her counters, light a candle, even run an air purifier. But if the placement remains unchanged, or at least unmediated, the energetic conflict continues. So what can be done? In an ideal world, the stove and the sink would be separated by enough distance to allow each to express its full energy. A few feet of counter space, a curve in the cabinetry, or even an island that softens the line between them. But for most homes, this level of remodeling is not an option. Feng Shui, fortunately, doesn't require structural change to initiate energetic repair. It requires symbolic balance. And that is where the wood element comes in. In the five-element cycle, wood is the bridge between water and fire. It drinks the nourishment of water and feeds it to fire, allowing both elements to do their job in harmony. Wood doesn't suppress, it integrates. And in design terms, wood can be introduced in many subtle ways. A bamboo cutting board placed between the sink and the stove acts as a physical buffer and an energetic stabilizer. A pot of fresh herbs, such as basil, mint, or rosemary, not only introduces wood energy, but brings in fragrance, life, and a reminder of growth. Even something as small as a green dish towel, a narrow wooden tray, or a vertical rack made of birch or maple can serve as a mediator between these opposing forces. These additions are not about decoration. They are about function on an energetic level. They redirect the dialogue between water and fire so that the kitchen's message is one of harmony, not confrontation. Color also plays a role. Shades of green, warm browns, and earthy neutrals all support wood energy. A tea towel in sage green, a small frame print in olive tones. Even a simple ceramic bowl filled with limes or apples, placed in the line of sight between the sink and stove, can subtly shift the energy. The idea is not to mask the conflict, but to give it a path toward resolution. When water and fire are bridged with wood, their tension becomes productive, like creative friction that fuels growth rather than burnout. Let me offer a true-to-life example. A young couple in Singapore moved into a sleek, high-rise apartment. The kitchen was narrow, stove on one side, sink directly across. Within the first month, they noticed more arguments while cooking. Burnt food, forgotten groceries. They were both busy professionals, so they attributed it to stress. But one day, while reading about kitchen Feng Shui, the woman realized their layout was a textbook water-fire conflict. Without telling her partner, she placed a low planter of lemongrass between the two zones. She added a soft green dish mat and began placing their wooden chopping board in view, even when not in use. Over the next 2 weeks, she reported a noticeable change in tone during their evening meals. Fewer flare-ups, more laughter. She hadn't changed their schedules. She had changed the conversation between two elements that had been clashing from day one. In another case, a retired chef turned food blogger reached out after struggling with low energy. He cooked daily but felt uninspired. His kitchen was pristine but small, with a beautiful induction stove right beside an oversized stainless steel sink. He thought the sink was the problem. Too large, too dominant. He was considering replacing it. Instead, I suggested placing a narrow shelf between the two, with a small jade plant and a jar of wooden utensils. He also added a green ceramic spoon rest. Within a month, he reported a return of culinary inspiration. He began writing again, shooting content. He didn't renovate, he rebalanced. This is the lesson of the water-fire conflict. It's not always about changing what you have. It's about changing how what you have speaks to itself and to you. When the sink no longer floods the fire, and the fire no longer scorches the water, a rhythm returns. And from rhythm, vitality flows. You may find that meals become more mindful, conversations more fluid, and your sense of productivity more consistent. You may even notice that money becomes easier to hold, not because you've earned more, but because your space has stopped leaking the energy that earns it. So look at your kitchen. Stand between the sink and the stove. Ask yourself, is there space for wood to breathe? Is there something living, growing, or grounding between the elements that were never meant to collide? If the answer is no, don't worry. You don't need to overhaul your space. Just introduce one layer, one plant, one cutting board, one color, and then observe not just what changes in your kitchen, but what begins to move more easily in your life. 3. Medicine or illness-related items on the table. In Feng Shui, every surface in your home is a silent narrator. Your countertops, your bookshelves, your entryway console, all of them are constantly telling a story about who you are, what you believe, and what you're prepared to receive. But perhaps no surface is more symbolically potent than your dining table. It is not just where meals are shared. It is where nourishment becomes ritual, where families commune in moments of presence, where laughter echoes across bowls of rice, and where silence sometimes holds what words cannot. The dining table, by its very nature, represents abundance, togetherness, and flow. Its shape, placement, and contents directly influence the energetic tone of the household's relationship with support, fullness, and prosperity. It is the space where food, arguably the most intimate exchange of qi, becomes part of the home's energetic bloodstream. So what happens when this sacred, symbolic center becomes the resting place for medicine bottles, pill packets, thermometers, or blood pressure monitors? What does the table begin to say when it holds, day after day, objects that represent imbalance, treatment, and illness? In classical Feng Shui, this visual message is more than just clutter. It is a contradiction. The table says we are whole. The medication says we are not. The table says we gather to be nourished. The pills say we must manage what's breaking. When these signals merge, the result is energetic confusion. And when confusion lingers in the heart of the home's nourishment zone, it can manifest as subtle but persistent disharmony. Poor digestion, loss of appetite, chronic fatigue, family tension, or emotional dullness. Most importantly, it creates a field in which illness is no longer a visitor, but a resident. It makes the body remember something is wrong, even if that thing has already passed. Of course, medication is part of life. Healing is part of life, but so is placement. In the same way we wouldn't store garbage beside the altar or shoes atop the bed, placing symbols of illness on the dining table sends a contradictory message to the home's qi field. In Feng Shui, intention is expressed through location. Not everything belongs everywhere. And while the dining table is a wonderful place for fruits, flowers, seasonal symbols of gratitude, or bowls of shared meals, it is not the place to anchor reminders of suffering or imbalance. Let's imagine a common scene. A woman lives alone. Her dining table is small, tucked into a corner of the kitchen. For convenience, she places her daily vitamins, blood pressure pills, and a small cup of supplements in the center, next to a salt shaker and napkin holder. It becomes a habit. She eats next to the bottle. She occasionally talks to visitors while fiddling with her pill box. It's not a matter of neglect. It's a matter of utility. But over time, the table loses its sense of celebration. Meals become quieter. She begins skipping breakfast. The energy of maintenance replaces the energy of enjoyment. She doesn't realize it, but her space has been gently rehearsing the posture of being unwell, not because she is broken, but because she forgot to draw a line between healing and living. In another household, a family places their child's asthma inhalers and fever medication on the end of the table. Always in sight, always within reach, the child recovers, but the medicine stays. It becomes part of the decor, part of the daily view, part of the emotional weather of the house. And while the body heals, the memory of vulnerability remains fixed, repeated 3 times a day every time the family eats. Eventually, they stop gathering at the table. The couch becomes the new center, and the cohesion that once came with shared meals begins to erode. These stories are not about blame. They are about noticing. In Feng Shui, everything begins with noticing. And what we notice, we can tend. The remedy is not to ignore illness, nor is it to hide what is necessary. The solution is respectful storage. Discretion, energetic boundaries, store medications in closed wooden boxes, drawers, or ceramic containers. Choose materials that are grounding and stable. Wood for warmth, earth tones for steadiness. If daily reminders are needed, use a ritualized tray that can be covered or moved before meals. The act of placing the container away, even temporarily, says healing is honored, but not hosted at the table. It reclaims the surface as a place of connection, not correction. And while this may seem small, the energetic impact is profound. The table becomes lighter, meals become more pleasurable, guests feel more at ease. Children receive the message, this is a place of nourishment, not management. The body receives the message, we are supported, not broken. And that message, repeated subtly over time, begins to shape how energy flows through the home. There's also a deeper layer to this symbolism. In Feng Shui, objects hold memory. A pill bottle doesn't just hold medication, it holds the emotional charge of the moment it was first needed, the anxiety of diagnosis, the weight of side effects, the schedule of administration. These subtle energies become attached to the physical object. And when these objects live in sight, in the most communal and intimate space of the home, they extend their story. They keep the past in the present. They keep the imbalance in conversation. And that conversation, repeated subconsciously every day, becomes a groove in the field. One that can block army, slow momentum, and reinforce fatigue. This is not to say we must pretend to be well, only that we must decide what spaces speak, what stories. If your kitchen table is meant to represent fullness, then let it hold symbols of that fullness. A bowl of mandarins, a linen cloth, a handwritten blessing, a candle, even one small flower in a glass. These are not decorations, they are energetic placeholders. They say to the space, this is a place of enough. This is a place of wholeness. And when that becomes the default story, even during difficult seasons, the energy of recovery flows more freely. To test this, try a simple shift. Remove all illness-related items from your dining table for 1 week. Store them out of sight in a designated container. Before each meal, light a small candle or place a single piece of fruit in the center of the table. Eat with no visual reminders of imbalance. Observe what shifts, not only in how the meal feels, but how your body receives it. You may find yourself chewing slower, speaking more, feeling less rushed. These are not small things. They are indicators of rebalanced energy. And from that rebalanced place, healing becomes less of a task and more of a natural unfolding. So ask yourself today, with quiet honesty, what sits at the center of your table? And what story does it tell? 4. Exposed knives and sharp tools. The modern kitchen often prides itself on efficiency, minimalism, and visibility. Sleek countertops, magnetic knife racks, stainless steel blades in perfect alignment above the prep station. Ready for action, admired for design. We've been conditioned to see sharpness as sophistication, precision as control. A visible knife set, neatly ordered, suggests readiness and mastery. But beneath that visual order lies a deeper energetic pattern, one that is not measured by aesthetic appeal, but by what it communicates to the nervous system, to the flow of energy, and to the unspoken emotions that settle in the space. In Feng Shui, knives are not neutral tools. They are objects that carry intention, both literal and symbolic. At their core, knives divide. They are instruments of separation, clarity, and action. In the kitchen, they serve a noble role, to slice, to shape, to prepare nourishment. But when left visible, unshielded, or pointed toward areas of human presence, entryways, dining tables, seating areas, their function expands from culinary utility to energetic disruption. This is known in Feng Shui as shachi, cutting or harsh energy. It is not evil or toxic. It is directional, sharp, and aggressive. It is energy that moves quickly, interrupts flow, and creates fragmentation. The problem arises not from the knife itself, but from its position. A blade pointed outward speaks. It whispers urgency. It signals protection. It warns. This is not theory, it is biological. Our eyes register sharpness as potential threat. Our bodies, even unconsciously, respond with subtle vigilance. The shoulders rise, the jaw tenses, the breath shortens. And over time, this becomes baseline tension. In a room where nourishment is meant to happen, these messages are counterproductive. They invite alertness instead of softness, action instead of rest, division instead of togetherness. Let's ground this in everyday experience. Imagine a kitchen where the knives are stored in an open rack, mounted on the wall above the stove. Each blade visible, each handle upright. The family gathers for dinner. They pass through this space multiple times a day. Each glance at the blades is fleeting but cumulative. Over the course of a week, a month, a year, the energy of cutting becomes embedded in the rhythm of the home. It may show up as short tempers, miscommunications, emotional avoidance. It may manifest in a constant sense of being rushed, or in meals that feel more like tasks than moments of connection. In one home I visited, a couple complained of frequent arguments in the evening, especially during dinner prep. They had a beautifully organized kitchen with an expensive knife set displayed prominently on a magnetic strip above the island. It was their pride, each blade honed and aligned like artwork, but something felt off. The space was beautiful but cold, functional but not warm. I suggested they store the knives in a closed drawer or block, out of sight, away from the primary walking path. They were skeptical but agreed to try it. 2 weeks later, they reported a surprising shift, less irritation, fewer interruptions, a softness they hadn't realized was missing. The only thing they changed was the visibility of the blades. The energy shifted because the messaging shifted, and the message became, this is a place to prepare, not to defend. In another case, a single father had placed his chef's knife set on the dining table for convenience. He used it frequently and preferred quick access. But over time, he noticed his teenage son eating less at the table, often taking meals into his room. When asked why, the son simply said, "It doesn't feel nice there." There had been no argument, no dramatic incident, just the steady presence of tools meant to cut in a space meant to connect. After relocating the knives and creating a small centerpiece of fresh fruit instead, the father noticed his son slowly returning to the table. Energy speaks, and even silence has shape. So what then is the ideal way to store sharp tools in the kitchen? First, consider location. Keep knives away from seating zones and walkways. Never position them where they point toward an entry, doorway, or dining table. If you must use a wall-mounted rack, ensure it's on a sidewall, away from direct human paths, and avoid pointing blades upward. Second, consider containment. A knife block with a cover, a drawer organizer with a soft lining, or even a pull-out cabinet with vertical slots and allows the tools to rest when not in use. This isn't about superstition. It's about letting the energy of the space rest too. A kitchen that feels restful supports digestion, conversation, and presence. A kitchen that feels alert, always on, creates fatigue even when no one is cooking. Materials also matter. A wooden knife block brings in the wood element, which buffers the metal element of the blades. Wood softens, absorbs, and contains. Ceramic or clay holders can also introduce earth energy, grounding the sharpness. Avoid placing knives on reflective surfaces like stainless steel countertops or mirrored backsplashes, as this can amplify their presence and create energetic echo. In smaller spaces where options are limited, even a cloth covering or small screen in front of a knife rack can make a difference. The goal is not to erase the tool, but to let it sleep between uses. There's also an emotional layer worth exploring. In some households, visible knives become symbolic. They represent self-protection, control, or even unresolved tension. In homes where conflict has occurred, divorce, loss, trauma, the open presence of blades can unintentionally reinforce a posture of defensiveness. I need to be ready. I need to stay sharp. I can't relax here. These messages are unspoken but powerful. And when children grow up in spaces like this, they often absorb the edge without ever holding the knife. This is why the energy of a kitchen is not just about design. It's about emotional posture. A kitchen that allows the family to soften, slow down, and exhale is one that supports true nourishment. And nourishment is not just about food. It's about how we feel when we prepare it, when we share it, when we clean up afterward. If the energy is fragmented, the connection is thin. But if the energy is whole, contained, buffered, balanced, then even the simplest meal becomes a ceremony. To integrate this wisdom, try the following. Choose one day to review how sharp tools are stored in your kitchen. Without judgment or rush, observe where your knives live. Are they exposed? Do they face outward? Do they dominate the visual field? If so, consider relocating them or softening their presence. Add a wooden utensil alongside them. Introduce a textile nearby. Change the dominant shape in that part of the room from hardline to curve. Then observe not just the look of the space, but the feel. Do you breathe differently? Do you stand differently at the counter? Does conversation feel less jagged? This is the quiet power of Feng Shui. It doesn't demand belief, it invites awareness. And awareness, once cultivated, becomes clarity. Not just in the kitchen, but in the body, the budget, the family, the life. 5. Serving on chipped, broken plates. In many households, the kitchen drawer holds a quiet contradiction. Plates that are chipped, bowls with hairline cracks, mugs with worn rims. They are not broken enough to throw away, but not whole enough to feel beautiful. They occupy a kind of middle space, still functional, yet diminished. And because they still technically work, we keep them. Out of thrift, out of habit, out of the quiet human tendency to tolerate less than full support. But in the language of Feng Shui, these incomplete objects speak. They tell a story that subtly shapes the field of nourishment, prosperity, and emotional presence. And the story they tell is not one of utility, it is one of fracture. Every time we serve food on a chipped plate, we unconsciously rehearse the energy of not quite enough. We reinforce the idea that a crack is acceptable, that brokenness is fine as long as it still functions, that incompleteness is a normal part of life. And over time, that story stops being about plates. It becomes a posture, a way of living. We begin to normalize delay. We learn to tolerate stuckness. We stop expecting fullness, whether in meals, in relationships, or in wealth. In Feng Shui, the dining table is the heart of home nourishment. It is where physical energy becomes emotional cohesion. It is where families synchronize their rhythms, share stories, and build trust, not just with each other, but with the deeper current of life. The plates that carry that food are not mere containers. They are energetic vessels. They define the boundary between offering and receiving. They hold shape for nourishment to land. And when that shape is compromised, when it is chipped, cracked, or visibly incomplete, it alters the signal, subtly but consistently. There's a reason traditional cultures emphasize the symbolism of bowls, plates, and utensils. In Chinese tea ceremony, a chipped teacup is never used. In Japanese dining, the visual presentation of food is considered inseparable from its taste. In Ayurveda, the vessel is considered as vital as the ingredient. These traditions all point toward the same principle. The container shapes the energy of what it holds. So when we continue to use broken dishes, we send a message to the space. We are not quite whole, and that's okay. Over time, this quiet resignation becomes a kind of energetic ceiling. It subtly constrains the household's capacity to expand, attract, and store abundance. You may be wondering, but I'm just being practical. Why waste a perfectly usable plate? And that's fair. Feng Shui is not about aesthetic perfection. It is about energetic alignment. If a plate is whole, even if plain or inexpensive, it carries integrity. It says, I am enough to hold this meal fully. But if it is chipped, it communicates a loss that was never fully addressed. That matters, not because of superstition, but because of symbolism. What we use to serve nourishment becomes a mirror of how we receive it. And receiving is not just about food. It is about love, money, rest, time, and safety. When our servingware reflects loss, we are more likely to experience those qualities in our external life. We eat in ways that feel rushed. We overlook pleasure. We question whether we deserve better. This pattern is particularly important in homes where financial stress has become chronic. Often the kitchen is filled with functional but energetically incoherent items: dented pots, stained utensils, cracked glasses. These items may not appear to matter, but together they create a visual and tactile landscape that says, we are making do. And while making do is sometimes necessary, it is not a long-term energetic strategy for abundance. Eventually, the message of lack becomes self-fulfilling. The household adapts to scarcity, the body learns to expect strain, and the table becomes a place of management, not nourishment. The good news is that this can be shifted, and the act of shifting it is deeply symbolic. It begins with noticing. Walk through your kitchen. Open your cabinets. Look at your most commonly used plates and bowls. Notice which ones are chipped, cracked, or incomplete. Hold them in your hands. Ask yourself, not with judgment, but with awareness. What does this object say about how I receive support? Does it reflect wholeness or compromise? Then, if you're ready, release it, but not carelessly. Wrap the item in fabric or paper. Thank it for its service. Acknowledge what it has held. This act of closure matters, because in Feng Shui, release without ritual often leaves energetic residue. But when we part with intention, we make space for coherence to return. If replacement isn't immediately possible, designate 1 or 2 whole plates as your sacred set. Use them for your first meal of the day. Let them become an anchor of intentional nourishment. When you use them, breathe slowly. Set your food with attention. Say quietly, I am supported. This isn't a performance, it's a recalibration. It reminds your system what wholeness feels like, and that reminder ripples outward. You may notice that meals feel more satisfying, that stress softens, that your body responds with less inflammation. This is the body receiving a new message. I am no longer in survival, I am allowed to thrive. There's also an emotional layer to this practice. In many homes, broken dishes are not replaced because they were part of a set or hold sentimental value. A chipped bowl from a grandmother, a cracked mug from an ex-partner. In these cases, the object becomes a vessel for unresolved emotion. Letting go can feel like a betrayal or a loss of memory. But Feng Shui teaches us that memory does not need to live in pain. That closure is not the same as forgetting. If you wish, photograph the object. Write a short note about its significance. Then release it. Let its story end with grace. Your space will thank you. Your nervous system will thank you. And your future meals will arrive in cleaner, clearer containers. In one household I worked with, a family kept using a large chipped bowl to serve salad every night. It had belonged to the mother's late father, and she felt emotionally attached to it. But over time, she noticed that dinner conversations became tense, that her children avoided the table. She also realized she hadn't bought any new kitchenware in years, not out of scarcity, but out of inertia. When she finally released the bowl, wrapping it with a note of thanks and placing a single flower inside before discarding it, she said it felt like something opened. That same week, she received a surprise invitation to a family reunion, something she hadn't dared initiate. The energy of completion made room for new connection. So the question becomes, what story are your dishes telling? Do they speak of continuity, warmth, and fullness? Or do they whisper of neglect, postponement, and incomplete goodbyes? The table is where we gather to be filled, not just with food, but with memory, with presence, with the unspoken comfort that says, here, you are whole. Let your plates reflect that wholeness. Let your bowls echo that welcome. Let the objects you use every day become quiet allies in your return to ease. 6. Dining table pressed to the wall. In many homes, especially small apartments, studio flats, or minimalist households, the dining table is pressed up against a wall. Sometimes it's out of necessity. Space is limited. The layout demands compromise. Other times, it's a choice made unconsciously to keep things neat, to make the room appear larger, to keep unused areas out of the way. But in Feng Shui, every piece of furniture holds both physical and energetic consequence. And the placement of the dining table, particularly when it's flush against a wall, has a deeper meaning than most people realize. On the surface, a wall-pressed table seems harmless, efficient even, but energy is not governed by appearances. It responds to movement, access, and invitation. And when a table is pressed to a wall, it signals a quiet denial of presence, of flow, of equal participation, and of spaciousness in relationships and ideas. The qi, or life force, cannot circulate freely around the table. One side is blocked, one chair is unused, one part of the circle is missing. In this way, a wall-pressed table becomes a metaphor for one-sided conversations, for unsupported roles in the household, for dreams that sit dormant in the corners of the mind, never invited fully to the table. In families, this often shows up as one person taking on more responsibility, others retreating. Mealtime becomes rushed. Seating becomes fixed. Spontaneity gives way to routine. The table, instead of being a dynamic field of connection, becomes a predictable function. And predictability, while useful for stability, can also suffocate innovation, especially in the spaces meant for nourishment and gathering. Let's explore the energetic mechanics behind this. The dining table is not just a place to eat. It is the symbolic hearth of shared qi. It is where energy gathers and disperses, where ideas are exchanged, where laughter carries weight, where silence is allowed to soften. In classical Feng Shui, round or oval tables are preferred because they allow equal flow. No head of the table, no sharp corners. But even a square or rectangular table, if it breathes, if it has room around all sides, can function with balance. The key is accessibility. When a table is pressed against a wall, even partially, the qi can only enter and exit from limited paths. Imagine a river with a dam placed too close to its source. The flow becomes narrow, predictable, and eventually sluggish. In the home, this stagnation doesn't show up as obvious decay. It's more subtle. Ideas that feel half-baked, projects that never get started, conversations that always feel one-dimensional. Even digestion can be affected. You may eat the right foods at the right time, but still feel heavy, not because of what you ate, but because of the environment in which you ate it. In Feng Shui, nourishment is not just about ingredients, it's about context. And when the space around a table is tight, the body does not fully receive. Let's consider an example. A man in his 40s lives in a high-rise apartment with a beautiful city view. He's a writer, works from home, and eats most of his meals alone. His dining table, a sleek black rectangle, is pressed against the far wall of his open kitchen. He uses only one chair. The others are pushed in tightly, unused. Over time, he begins to feel stuck, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet erosion of enthusiasm. His creativity stalls. His sleep becomes restless. He doesn't invite guests anymore. When I ask about his table, he shrugs. I don't need all the space. But energy doesn't measure need by use. it measures by invitation. We adjust the table, pull it out from the wall just a foot, add a linen runner, a small centerpiece of herbs. He starts sitting in a different chair each day, first as a novelty, then as a ritual. 2 weeks later, he emails, "I'm writing again." This is not magic, it's spatial coherence. When energy moves, life moves. In another household, a young couple lives in a townhouse. Their dining table is pressed to the wall due to baby gear, boxes, and storage overflow. They haven't eaten dinner at the table in months. Their meals are shared on the couch in silence. When asked how they feel about the space, the woman replies, "It's just temporary." But temporary has become habitual, and that habit has created emotional distance. When they finally clear the clutter, pull the table back, add cushions to the chairs, and hang a soft textile on the wall beside it, something changes. Their baby begins to nap more easily. Their dinners become slower. They start talking again. Not because the table moved, but because their bodies felt invited to rest, to connect, to arrive. This is the core logic of Feng Shui, that form shapes experience. And that even small adjustments, like pulling a table 2 feet from a wall, can reshape the emotional weather of a home. If space is limited and full access around the table is not possible, then create softness. Add a runner made of cotton or linen, place round placemats to invite circular energy, avoid hard, cold materials like steel or glass when possible, or balance them with warmth, wood, fabric, candlelight. The goal is not to perfect the space, but to shift its invitation. To say, here all parts of you are welcome. Here energy is allowed to circulate. Here life is not boxed in. Placement, too, communicates priority. When a table is centered, it says, "This matters." This is where we return to ourselves. When it is pressed to the edge, it says, "This is secondary. This is a convenience, not a ceremony." And the household begins to mirror that sentiment. Meals become optional. Presence becomes fragmented. The very act that once gathered the family, eating together, becomes an afterthought. But when the table breathes, the family breathes with it. When there is space to walk around, there is space to shift perspective. To sit across from someone instead of beside. To try a new seat. To linger after the last bite. These are small things, but they shape the memory of the home. And over time, memory becomes mood. Mood becomes pattern. Pattern becomes fate. If you're not sure where to start, begin with one gesture. Clear the surface of the table completely. Wipe it down slowly, not to clean, but to reset. Place one soft object in the center, a bowl of oranges, a cloth, a candle. Step back, see if the space feels different. Then, if possible, move the table away from the wall, even by a few inches. See what opens, not just visually, but emotionally. Does the room feel less tight? Does the air move differently? Do you? In Feng Shui, the home is not a container. It is a field, a quiet, pulsing mirror of how you relate to flow. When energy moves, opportunities return. When a table is allowed to breathe, so is the family that gathers around it. Not perfectly, not immediately, but inevitably, because the body recognizes when space has been made for it to arrive. 7. Unused or greasy stove burners. In Feng Shui, the stove holds a central and irreplaceable position in the home. It is not merely an appliance. It is not just the place where meals are cooked and recipes come to life. It is the heart of prosperity, the engine that transforms raw resources into nourishment, effort into result, and intention into sustenance. And within this heart lie the burners, each one a symbolic path of abundance, a directional vessel through which qi moves and converts the invisible into the tangible. When one or more of those burners are neglected, unused, dirty, greasy, or forgotten, the message to the home and to life itself becomes clear. Part of our prosperity potential is asleep. In classical Feng Shui, the stove's qi is linked directly to the flow of money, vitality, and achievement. The more balanced and actively used the stove, the more avenues for income and opportunity are energetically open. Each burner represents a different potential stream of wealth, whether that's material gain, supportive relationships, fulfilling work, or luck arriving from unexpected sources. If you always cook on the same burner, the implication is that you are relying on one channel alone. This might be your day job, your partner's income, or one dependable source of support. While there is nothing inherently wrong with that, it can lead to stagnation, especially if that one burner begins to fail, or if that path grows rigid. On the other hand, rotating your usage between burners symbolizes diversification. It awakens all potential lines of support. It invites new income streams, surprise opportunities, and subtle yet important shifts in your ability to generate and receive. Now let us consider what happens when a burner remains greasy or neglected. At first glance, it may appear to be a minor cleaning issue, nothing more than a visual imperfection. But Feng Shui teaches us that neglect accumulates. A greasy burner signals blocked fire energy. And fire energy is synonymous with drive, motivation, clarity, and the power of transformation. When that energy is covered in oil or food residue, it dulls. It becomes inconsistent. You may still cook, still function, still survive, but the edge softens. You hesitate. Your vision blurs. The fire is still there, but it doesn't reach full potential. This doesn't mean a greasy stove will curse your home, but it does mean the field is muddied. The signal is weaker. The conversation between you and your prosperity becomes less fluid. Let's imagine a household. A young professional lives alone. She works long hours, mostly orders takeout, and only uses the front right burner to heat tea or oatmeal in the morning. The other 3 burners are clean, but unused. Weeks go by, then months. She begins to feel stuck, creatively dry, financially plateaued. She decides to refresh her space and reads about the symbolic importance of stove burners. Skeptical but open-minded, she begins cleaning the stove thoroughly. She polishes each burner, lights them all once a week, and makes a point to cook small, intentional meals, even something as simple as eggs or stir-fried greens. After a month, she notices subtle shifts. A friend unexpectedly offers her a freelance gig. Her energy feels more even. She returns to a hobby she abandoned. The burners, once asleep, have been reawakened, and so has her sense of personal agency. This is not superstition. This is coherence. The kitchen began speaking in alignment again, and when that happens, life responds. In another case, a family of 5 shares a home filled with laughter, love, and a good deal of chaos. Their stove is well used, but the back burners are covered in grease. Too difficult to reach, rarely cleaned. Over time, they notice that financial decisions feel rushed, that unexpected repairs eat up their savings, that they are constantly running to catch up. When the stove is finally deep cleaned, burners scrubbed, gas lines checked, and all burners used for simple rituals, the family reports a shift. Not in how much they make, but in how it stretches. Budgeting becomes easier. Conversations around money grow less tense. One child wins a scholarship, another discovers a new talent. Again, it's not the stove creating magic. It's the restored rhythm of care. It's the act of tending to what fuels the household. So how can we integrate this practice into daily life? Begin by observing your stove. Which burners do you use most? Which are neglected? Are they evenly clean, or is one always covered in oil or crumbs? Is the surface wiped down with mindfulness, or only when absolutely necessary? Awareness is the first act of change. Next, initiate a weekly ritual. Choose a day, Sunday morning or Friday night, and clean all the burners. Wipe gently, not with urgency, but with care. As you do, say quietly to yourself, I open new paths of nourishment. I tend to the fire that feeds me. Then light each burner briefly, even if you're not cooking. Let the flame rise, let it speak, let it move energy through the space. If you wish, place a pot of herbs or soup on a rarely used burner. Let your home see that fire is alive in every direction. This sends a signal, not just to the space, but to your own subconscious. I am capable of receiving in more than one way. Beyond usage, also consider the materials around your stove. Is it cluttered with oil bottles, spoons, or storage? Is the wall behind it clean or stained with time? Does the stove have breathing room, or is it boxed in by appliances and decor? A stove that breathes supports a home that breathes. Fire needs space to move, and so do you. Add a small bowl of salt nearby to absorb scattered qi. Hang a wooden spoon or bamboo utensil as a grounding symbol. Avoid mirrors behind the stove, as they can double the fire and lead to excess or burnout. Instead, choose earth-tone tile, warm stone, or matte surfaces that support balance. The shape and design of the burners themselves also carry meaning. Round burners promote unity and flow. Square burners represent structure and order. If your stove is uneven, with one burner consistently malfunctioning, address it, even if it still works. Feng Shui teaches us that unresolved malfunction becomes normalized. And when we normalize what doesn't work, we unconsciously accept less than what we deserve. Repair is not just about function, it is about alignment. The message should be, all parts of my home are supported, all paths are open, all energy is welcome. This philosophy can be extended to other fire sources as well. The oven, the kettle, the toaster. While they are not as symbolically central as the stove, they all participate in the home's fire energy. Clean them, respect them, use them with care. Let them be part of a larger field of functional, aligned support. Together, these instruments compose the music of your kitchen, and when they are tuned, your entire life begins to resonate at a higher frequency. One final thought. In many homes, cooking becomes a chore, something rushed, squeezed between obligations. But when we pause, when we light a burner with reverence, clean a surface with care, stir a pot with presence, we re-enter the sacred. The sacred, not as something lofty or mystical, but as something fully embodied. To cook is to transform. To clean is to prepare the field. To rotate burner use is to declare, I am open to more. I am willing to receive support from every direction. I trust that life is abundant, not just from one source, but from many. So today, take 5 minutes, look at your stove, choose one unused burner, light it, breathe, say nothing or say quietly, this path is open again. Then notice over the days and weeks ahead, observe what begins to move, not just in your kitchen, but in your thoughts, your finances, your mood. The changes may be small, or they may be astonishing. Either way, they begin with fire. And fire, when honored, always answers. Part 3, what to add? Subtle wealth magnets for the kitchen. In every culture, the kitchen has quietly held more power than we often acknowledge. It is where the unseen becomes seen, where energy turns into nourishment, raw potential into warmth, and hope into daily ritual. And within Feng Shui, the kitchen is not only the domain of fire and earth, it is a vessel of possibility. It carries within it the rhythm of effort and reward. But beyond the placement of the stove and the order of the pantry, there are smaller, more symbolic tools that hold transformative power. These are not gadgets. They are energetic companions, simple, often overlooked items that, when placed with intention, become magnets of prosperity, steadiness, and sweetness. The rice jar, the honey jar, the fresh herbs or citrus bowl, their power lies not in superstition, but in symbolism. And when integrated into the kitchen field, they recalibrate the space from mere function to active receptivity. Let us begin with the rice jar. Across Asia, rice is not merely a staple food, it is a living metaphor for life itself. It represents consistency, stored energy, quiet stability. In Feng Shui, the rice jar is considered one of the most potent containers of abundance. Unlike flashy wealth cures, it does not shout, it anchors. To keep a rice jar full, clean, and consciously placed is to say to the home, we are always nourished, even in quiet times. We are connected to a lineage of steadiness. We are rooted. This is not about food security alone, it's about energetic security. When the rice jar is tended to with care, it becomes a daily signal to the subconscious. Prosperity lives here, not in the form of windfalls or drama, but in the steady hum of enoughness. The setup is simple. Use a jar made of ceramic, glass, or wood, natural materials that carry earth energy and hold memory well. Avoid plastic, which dulls qi and lacks elemental resonance. Fill the jar 3/4 full. Not to the brim, because prosperity should have space to grow. Not near empty, because lack becomes habit if repeated often enough. Place a clean coin at the base of the jar, any denomination, any currency, as long as it holds the intention of value. Optionally, tie a red string around the lid or base. Red, in Feng Shui, is the color of vitality, ignition, and visibility. It tells the energy this jar is active. This abundance is seen. Store the jar in a pantry, cabinet, or shelf at waist height. Not on the floor, not too high. Let it be accessible. Let it feel respected. And every few weeks open it. Breathe in the quiet scent of grain. Stir gently. Say, if only in thought, I honor the flow that feeds me. These moments become anchors. And from anchors, wealth takes root. Then there is the honey jar, less known in traditional Feng Shui, but deeply resonant when viewed through the lens of symbolic richness. Honey is sweetness preserved. It is gold that flows. It is what remains after effort, the gift after the labor of the bees. To keep a jar of honey visible in the kitchen is to call in gentle ease. It says, let my abundance arrive with grace, not struggle. Let what I build taste sweet. Store the honey in a clear glass jar where light can move through it. Clarity is part of the message. If the jar is opaque, the energy becomes hidden. If it's cluttered among spices or stored high on a shelf, its symbolic power weakens. Let it live on a central counter or inner cabinet that you open often. Under the lid, place one bay leaf, a symbol of protection, clarity, and courage. Additionally, add a small piece of gold foil paper, not for show but for resonance. This honors the gold tones of honey and signals to the field. Sweetness and wealth belong together here. Use the honey as part of a Monday ritual. Monday, in many traditions, is ruled by the moon, a time of reflection, inner rhythm, and gentle beginnings. Each Monday morning, place a spoonful of honey into your tea or warm water. As you stir, imagine sweetness infusing your week. Not sugar highs, not quick wins, but the kind of sweetness that lingers. Calm joy, quiet success, relationships that nourish without draining. Say, in whatever words are true to you, I welcome softness, I welcome sustainable wealth, I welcome warmth that stays. Then sip slowly. This becomes a sensory prayer, not religious, not performative, just present, just real. You begin to taste your intentions, and over time, your life begins to match the flavor you invite. Finally, we come to the citrus bowl or herb offering. This is the most visible of the three and perhaps the most active. Unlike rice, which anchors, or honey, which flows, herbs and citrus uplift. They circulate. They cut through stagnation. When placed intentionally in the kitchen, especially between the sink and stove, the classic water-fire conflict zone, they mediate, they harmonize. A small bowl of lemons, limes, oranges, or fresh lemongrass and basil becomes a living symbol of movement, of the kind of wealth that doesn't just arrive, but stays fresh, stays alive. The scent matters. Citrus brightens, basil awakens, lemongrass clears. These are not merely decorative. They are sensory reminders that your space is vital, attended to, and pulsing with renewal. The key here is freshness. Do not let the bowl become ornamental. Replace weekly. Remove anything wilted or rotting as soon as it appears. In Feng Shui, decay left unnoticed sends a message. I'm too busy to care. And that message becomes a self-fulfilling loop. But freshness says, I'm awake. I'm participating in my field. I am not waiting passively for luck. I am making space for it. Place the bowl on the counter where light touches it, or on the kitchen island if you have one. If neither is available, use a side counter between major elements. The fridge, the sink, the prep zone. Let the bowl live where movement happens. Its chi will join the rhythm. These three practices, though small, are powerful because they shift the field not through drama, but through consistency. They ask nothing of you but attention. And in Feng Shui, attention is the currency of change. When you stir rice with care, you stir the field of enough. When you spoon honey with intention, you shift your relationship with effort. When you replace basil leaves each Sunday, you declare, I tend to what matters, and the home hears you, not in words but in rhythm, and rhythm becomes reality. So if your kitchen feels tired, if your finances feel stalled, if your mornings begin with rush instead of steadiness, try one of these. Not all, not perfectly, just one. Let it live in your space for a month. Let it teach you something about presence. Let it surprise you. You may find that people respond to you more warmly, that ideas begin to flow more easily, that stress dissolves just a little faster. These are not miracles, they are movements. And movement, in the language of Qi, is always the beginning of return. Final, so now we arrive, not at an end, but at the pause between breath and next step. Over the last few moments, you've walked with me through the quiet corridors of your kitchen, not to redesign it, but to re-see it. We began with part one, where we looked at the stove itself, not as an appliance, but as a compass of wealth and transformation. In part two, we explored the hidden tension between water and fire, the symbolic clash between sink and stove, and how something as simple as a green towel could become a bridge. Part three invited us to look at what sits on our tables, medicines, reminders of illness, and asked whether they belong in the heart of nourishment. In part four, we examined exposed knives and sharp tools, and how their presence may be silently shaping the emotional atmosphere of the home. Part five uncovered the unspoken story of chipped plates, how what's cracked on the surface may reflect what's been tolerated inside. In part six, we pulled the dining table away from the wall to make space, not just physically, but for conversation, movement, and support. Part seven brought us to the burners again, the ones left unused, and reminded us that every path of abundance must be lit occasionally if we wish to stay open to all forms of receiving. And in part eight, we planted small, subtle wealth magnets, the full rice jar, the sweet jar of honey, the citrus bowl or fresh herbs that quietly refresh a tired space and call in gentle prosperity. Each of these parts, while simple, carries something profound, not because they change your kitchen overnight, but because they change how you listen to it. Energy doesn't always shout. Sometimes it hums beneath the surface, asking to be noticed. And sometimes the fortune we seek is already trying to arrive. If only the doorway were clearer, the burner clean, the table welcoming, the rice jar tended to. So here's my invitation. Don't change everything, not all at once. Choose one idea, just one. Pick one part from this journey, maybe the rice jar, maybe the table shift, and try it for 7 days. Let it settle, let it teach you, let it show you what moves when you move even slightly. And if you notice a change, a softened morning, an unexpected call, a lighter meal, I'd love to hear your story. Drop it in the comments. Your insight may become someone else's shift. And if this video gave you something, a new lens, a gentle nudge, a reason to breathe deeper in your own kitchen, I warmly invite you to subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. Your presence helps me walk this quiet path toward 1,000 followers. And every like, every share, every word you leave behind supports me in sharing this work with more homes like yours. You don't need to be perfect. You don't.